On today's show, Jayson Tatum with an all-time performance, dropping 51 points in Game 7 to close out the series and help the Boston Celtics advance to the Eastern Conference Finals yet again. Joe Mazzulla making some much-needed adjustments across Game 6 and 7 to help close out this series. Plus, how will the Celtics look in a rematch with the Miami Heat in the Eastern Conference Finals? It's all coming up right here at Locked On NBA.
You are Locked On NBA, your daily NBA podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's up and welcome to another edition of Locked On NBA, the biggest stories with the local experts. I'm your host, Jackson Gatlin, also host of Locked On Rockets right here on the Locked On Podcast Network. Now, today's episode is brought to you by Prize Picks. Next game, how about Nikola Jokic to score more than 26.5 points? What about LeBron James to have more than 7.5 rebounds? Or how about Jimmy Butler to have less than 6.5 assists? Or what about Jayson Tatum to have more than 3.5 three-pointers made? So what is Prize Picks? It's daily fantasy sports, but how does it work? Basically, you pick 2 to 6 players, and if they score more or less than their Prize Picks projection, you can win up to 25 times back on your money on any entry that you submit. There's no competing against other people. It's just you versus the projections available. And Prize Picks offers projections on any sport that you watch. That's NBA, NFL, MLB, NHL, PGA. They've got you covered for all the action over at Prize Picks. Entries can be made in 60 seconds or less. It's that simple. They're safe. They offer fast withdrawals. Currently operational in over 30 states and Canada. And right now, every day of the NBA playoffs and the finals, one Prize Picks user will win a chance at becoming a millionaire. But you got to download the app to find out how. So download the Prize Picks app or go to prizepicks.com to sign up and play daily fantasy sports. First-time users can receive a 100% instant deposit match up to $100 with promo code LOCKEDON. If you deposit $100, Prize Picks will give you $100. If you deposit $50, Prize Picks will give you $50. So don't forget to enter promo code LOCKEDON at sign up for an instant deposit match up to $100. Joining us now is the host of Locked On Celtics, John Karalis. You can track down wherever you listen to your podcasts and on YouTube. Just search Locked On Celtics. And John, the Celtics closing out things, a huge Game 7 win behind what is easily an all-time performance from Jayson Tatum. Now the Celtics' leading scorer in Game 7 playoff history, 51 points. He had 51 points, 13 rebounds, 5 dimes, 2 steals, no turnovers, an absolutely electric performance from Jayson Tatum in this game. He was a man on a mission, and he delivered the Celtics a Game 7 win.
Boy, you know, when you put the numbers all together in a row like that, that sounds pretty good. Considering Celtics history, passing Sam Jones, which I think is the most underrated Celtic of all time. One of the most underrated all-time greats. Just got to get that Sam Jones plug in there. Yeah, I think Tatum's 51 points. Let's rewind and trace that back to the fourth quarter of Game 6, where he had a huge weight lifted off his shoulders. We talked about this before, and I feel like that performance, that kind of knowledge that, hey, you know what? I can go out there and suck for 3 quarters.
Because he had 3 points, for the context, right? He had 3 points through 3 quarters in Game 6.
That's right. And in the fourth quarter, he had 16 and outscored the Sixers by himself. This is, by the way, he did that again in the third quarter of this game. So he personally has outscored the Sixers in 2 of 4 quarters, going back to the fourth quarter of Game 6, which is kind of wild. But hitting those shots, hitting those 4 3-pointers, I asked him about it after the game, and he's like, yeah, it just kind of like, I knew I've played my worst, and we were still able to get out of there. They had us on the ropes. We came back. We got that win. I felt good. And then he came in knowing that it's not so bad. It's not so bad. A couple of shots don't fall. It's not so bad. Joe Mazzulla said, I told him, don't listen to everybody and go out and try to get a couple easy buckets. That's what you and I think would say. Get Jayson Tatum going early and then see him cook. And Mazzulla's like, no, go out there and do what you do. Do the other stuff. Defend, rebound, pass the ball, make the right play. The shots will fall. All that confidence built up from his coach from that previous game, I think manifested itself. And starting with the great defensive job that everybody did on Joel Embiid, and then Tatum could take advantage of Embiid, who was worn down by the third quarter. He did so much damage against Embiid to pulling him out to the perimeter and getting to the rim. It was just incredible to watch all the different ways that Tatum could score.
The Celtics only led by 3 at halftime. How did Boston kind of blow the roof off this thing in that third quarter?
Yeah, I think starting in the second quarter, they calmed down. There was a point where Boston was down 8, and they had the flagrant foul on James Harden, and that keyed an 8-0 run. And Boston outscored Philly, I want to say 28-17 the rest of the way. That sent them into the half with some confidence. They knew that they had turned a corner. And in the third quarter, it was just Tatum finding the right matchups. It was Tatum just simply getting hot. But also, the Celtics got stops all over the floor. Harden hit one shot in that quarter. It was the only shot he hit in the second half. For a stretch there until about 2.5 minutes to go, Philly had only hit 2 shots the entire quarter. Meanwhile, the Celtics were just pouring it on over and over and over again. That defensive job, got to credit Al Horford again for just dominating that matchup against Embiid. The creative ways the Celtics were able to send doubles, late doubles. Robert Williams taking away the pick and roll that Harden and Embiid have been relying on. Embiid said it after the game. They took that away, and they just kind of forced us to make plays other ways, and he couldn't do it. It just getting those stops, and the Celtics, once that water turned on with the 3-pointers and Tatum started drilling 3-pointers, that was it. It was a wrap. There was nothing anybody could do about that. Third quarter was as dominant a quarter as you're going to find in any NBA game anywhere.
Joe Mazzulla and his relative inexperience was definitely a factor going into these playoffs. He made the adjustment to go back to starting Rob Williams in game 6 and 7, kind of relying on that double big lineup quite a bit more over these last 2 games. How important was that change for Boston, and how much did you see Mazzulla kind of mature over the course of this 7-game series?
Yeah, I think that changed the entire series because, like I said, that now challenged the Sixers to do something away from the rim. They could no longer live in the paint, and that puts pressure on PJ Tucker. Now, PJ Tucker hit 3 of his first 5 3-pointers, but he only took 1 after that because the Celtics calmed down. The first, I want to say, 15 minutes of the game, you'd see the Celtics flying into the third row on closeouts. It was just ridiculous how overly hyped they were for this game and how fast they were playing. Once they calmed down, that game plan started to snap into place with Rob there in the middle to kind of patrol that paint, deter guys from getting to the rim, and say, you're going to have to beat us from 3. We don't believe that you can do that for 48 minutes. And they couldn't. Those shots just didn't fall. Tobias Harris, PJ Tucker, those guys fell off. And with Harden locked up, with Embiid locked up, that was the difference in the game. But it starts with Rob in the middle of that paint, and the way guys can play off of him. They just made it impossible for Philly to score.
I feel like I already know the answer to this one because you said his name, a couple moments ago. But outside of Tatum and Brown, who would you anoint the Celtics MVP for this series, and why?
Oh, Sam Hauser easily. Yeah, of course it's Al Horford. Come on, man. Come on, Al Horford. He played like a 25-year-old out there. He was great. It's amazing to see Al Horford continue to be the best defender against Joel Embiid that the league has, basically.
He just has his number, man.
Yeah, he's smart, but he's strong enough to handle some of the pressure, to handle some of the physicality. He's still athletic enough to get up there and challenge a shot. We know that Embiid's not 100%, so I'm not going to pretend that Embiid was out there going full Embiid and Horford was out there just denying him at every turn. That's not true, but that's the Embiid that was on the floor, and the Horford that was on the floor was better than him at a lot of turns. It's some of the best stretches defensively. You had Horford blocking Embiid straight up. It tells you how far Embiid really needs to go to be healthy, but also tells you how good Horford is positionally and his anticipation and his ability to go out there and guard a guy one-on-one, the MVP one-on-one, when you don't need to send help as often and you can stay home on those other guys, that's just a huge difference maker. And, in some ways it's a shame for Philly because they're back in that same spot after a second round exit, but it is what it is. And their other option would have been to not play Embiid and see if they could capture that game one matchup. And that didn't seem like an option. So Horford and his job against Embiid overall, he said he kind of sacrificed his offense a little bit to be that locked in on defense. And it really worked out.
Celtics moving on to a Eastern Conference Finals rematch with the Miami Heat. Now things look a little bit different this time around than things did last year, but give us your prediction going into this Eastern Conference Finals rematch, John.
Yeah, it's tough to call, right? Because the Celtics are clearly on paper the better team than the Miami Heat, right? They were the top seed for a long time. They fell to second, but everybody seems to say, hey, look, this is obviously the best team in the NBA, especially after Milwaukee got bounced by the Miami Heat. Miami doesn't really adhere to what the paper says, though. They are out there. They work harder than anybody. I know a lot of people in Boston like to make fun of the term Heat culture, but it works. It means something to them. And Spoelstra is the best coach in the NBA, probably. So it's going to be a tough series. Boston has the matchups. Boston has the advantages. Tatum, Brown, Marcus Smart's better than, Kyle Lowry at this point. Like, there's a lot of matchups you sit there and be like, oh, wow, Boston has them most of the places. And we can argue about Jimmy Butler. I know Jimmy Butler's playoff Jimmy. And that's why I think the Celtics should win this series. But how does an 8 seed that lost a play-in game get this far? Other than they work hard, they don't care about what pundits say, and they are creative and smart, and they go out there and they make you beat them. That's going to be good for at least a couple of wins in this series. And if you say that effort is good for 2, very easy to say Jimmy Butler is good for 1, and Bam Adebayo's defense could be good for 1, and that could get them to the finals. So you can't take Miami lightly at all. I still think Boston should win this. If Boston plays like they did in Game 7, they should win it easily. But we know Boston doesn't always play that way. So it'll be a tough series, I think.
For a full breakdown on this Boston Celtics Game 7 win and all of Boston's playoff action as they take on the Miami Heat moving into the next round, you'll have us covered over at Locked On Celtics. John, I appreciate you stopping by Locked On NBA with me.
I always appreciate you, Jackson.